Yeah, please remember you can't see yourself, right? So be prepared at all times. Good morning and welcome to the Office of the Leader of the Opposition's press conference for May 31st, 2022. I'd like to welcome all the media personnel and the persons viewing us online today. Today's panel, we have with us none other than the leader of the People's National Congress Reform and Opposition Leader, Mr. Aubrey C. Norton, Member of Parliament. And to his right, Shadow Minister of Local Government, Mr. Ganesh Maipal, Member of Parliament. And to his right, Mr. Elson Lowe, Economist. Today's press statement will be read by the leader. We will go right ahead.
Thank you very much, Shanika. Members of the press, all present, good morning. The government fails to resume consultations. Having attempted to negotiate in good faith with the president, I was engaging the government through Ms. Gail Teixeira, Minister of Parliamentary Affairs and Governance. In the light of the evolving situation, I believe it is apposite that I no longer engaged through her. In the circumstance, Mr. Roysdale Ford, Shadow Minister Legal Affairs, will be my representative to engage Minister Teixeira. They having engaged should pave the way for the leader of the opposition and the president to consult. The joint statement signed on the 13th day of May 2022 stated that, and I quote, "It was further agreed that the consultation will be guided by the Constitution and the in-person consultation will resume on a date to be fixed, but within a week." The aforesaid time expired without the resumption of in-person consultation and without any prior communication by the government is testimony to the government's disregard for agreements it signs and is a manifestation of bad faith. Ms. Gail Teixeira, the Minister of Parliamentary Affairs and Governance, in a letter dated the 27th day of May 2022, which was addressed to the leader of the opposition, purports to offer excuses for the failure to resume the consultation within a week. The excuses provided in the letter are, firstly, the leader of the opposition must be aware that Guyana hosted the first Agri-Investment Forum and Expo on May 19th to 21st, 2022. And secondly, that this was followed by the national and regional celebrations of the 56th independence anniversary. The excuses proffered are devoid of credibility and disconcerting, as the president must surely have known when he was making the agreement that he had those engagements, as they were certainly planned in advance of the commencement of the consultations, before our engagement. These actions are indicators of the manifestation of incompetence or a disregard for the president and other constitutional responsibilities. The letter of Friday 27th day of May 2022, which extended an invitation from the president to resume in-person consultation on Monday the 30th day of May 2022, was received late in the evening of the 27th day of May 2022. The leader of the opposition was unavailable to accept the aforesaid invitation, having regard to certain commitments and a pressing schedule. The opposition continues to point out that it is not yet in receipt of the grounds upon which each specific recommendation for appointments, which is the subject of consultation, are being made. This state of affairs persists despite the leader of the opposition in his letter dated 11th day of May 2022 that the letter from Gail Teixeira was, and I quote, "bereft of any materials upon which I can form a considered opinion on the subjects of the proposed consultation. We insist that such grounds are necessary if they are to be meaningful constitution in keeping with the Constitution. In recognition of the importance and necessity of making permanent appointments to the office of Chancellor and Chief Justice, we restate our commitment to agreeing to the immediate appointment of Justice Yonit Cummins Edwards and Roxanne George Wilshire as the Chancellor and Chief Justice, respectively. The President's statement that he is not prepared at this time to engage in consultation on the matter of supreme constitutional importance is a seemingly gross dereliction of his constitutional duty and a clear indication that he is non-responsive to the concerns of civil society and the people. We in the coalition will be responsive to civil society and our people's concerns. We call for immediate action to place on the agenda consultations which will result in the confirmation of the Chancellor acting and Chief Justice acting. Inequality and poverty on the rise, quality of life on the decline in Guyana. In less than 2 years, the PPP government has brought this country to the point where inequality and poverty have climbed, while the overall quality of life of citizens has dropped. We do not see an end to this trajectory. The PPP's bad attitude, bad policy making, and bad governance will continue to make things worse for all citizens, but especially for low-income families and others experiencing similar hardship. High and rising inflation and cost of living continue to batter Guyanese family. Kitchen tables and cupboards are increasingly deprived of basic foods and nutrition. The struggle to make ends meet for basic necessities, food, rent, transportation, electricity, water, etc., has become a crisis both nationally and within individual homes. But as inflation and cost of living have soared, so too have inequality and poverty. Not only has the buying power of the dollar diminished, but the stagnant wages in both the private and public sectors have further exacerbated living standards. In less than 2 years, the PPP government has pushed more and more Guyanese below the poverty line. Sporadic one-off cash grants and low-paying temporary jobs will not change this reality. This is mere band-aid and political pandering. These measures cannot result in a better quality of life for the people of Guyana. The first withdrawal from the Natural Resource Fund will not change anything. Not $1 of this US $2 million sum is going towards easing the pain in our people's pockets. The longer inflation remains high, and the longer the government continues to engage in egotism and self-denial, the poorer and poorer families will become. In the midst of vast oil resources, Guyanese are being placed on the breadline and are falling below the poverty line in growing numbers. We are paying the price for the PPP government's gross incompetence, its shady and corrupt alliance with their cronies, and its disdain for the masses of citizens. What is also worsening our country is the overall quality of life. What do we mean by quality of life? We use this term to include not only material goods and necessities of our living, but also the more intangible and subjective aspects of comfortable living, such as our personal rights and freedoms, our sense of well-being, our confidence in the future for ourselves and children, and our security and safety. All these aspects of life also are wilting under the PPP. As a nation, we are now either adrift, stalled, or in reverse. Life has gotten worse under the PPP. Guyanese deserve better. With oil wealth, we have increased our financial capacity to deliver the life people have expected for decades. With the right government and governance, Guyana can be transformed. At the moment, Guyanese see no salvation in the PPP's allocation of a mere Guyana $5 billion, less than 1% of the 2022 budget for cost of living relief to our people. Poor planning and wasteful spending. Much of that money has already been embezzled and has bypassed many who are eligible. Therefore, some of our party's short-term proposals are as follows. 1. Raise public sector and private sector wages in consultation with the union. Here, interim payments must be made while negotiations proceed. 2. Boost agricultural production, especially for short-cycle crops, through grants that allow small farmers to expand. 3. Ensure the tax cuts that have been implemented actually result in lower prices for consumers. Unfortunately, they are not. 4. Address the plight of senior citizens by increasing NIS and old age pensions benefits as a matter of urgency. 5. Boost the school feeding program to 2 nutritious, well-balanced meals a day. Use the program to create employment and business opportunities for cooks and caterers in local areas. 6. Subsidize electricity rates for low-income households. 7. Introduce transportation vouchers for the disabled, pensioners, and school children. 8. Expedite procurement rules and laws to ensure local residents can benefit more from projects as subcontractors and workers. These measures, among others, are what will impact the Guyanese people. With proper targeting and management, these and other proposals can make a real difference and in a more sustained manner. Serious times deserves serious government. These are serious times. But we have no serious government, and that is unfortunate. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. At this time, we will open the floor for questions on the press statement. As is customary, you will indicate by the raise of hand, state your name and your entity. I see the hand of News Talk Radio Guyana. You can go ahead.
Mr. Norton and Siobhan, News Talk Radio Railway. So could you say what exactly is the additional information you require? Could you explain a little more, please?
First of all, one has to understand meaningful consultation, and it is defined in the Constitution. One also has to look at the cases that would have passed, and one would recognize that in one of the cases, the CCJ virtually said that one, it must be in good faith, and they tended to move away from this view that consultation is the mere provision of curriculum vitae, etc., and that for it to be meaningful, more information has to be provided. For instance, the grounds on which you recommend somebody. Now, I can tell you from just doing our work, the government didn't provide me with this, but I haven't seen one of the names that they proposed. And then I saw the curriculum vitae. It turned out that this person is a PPP activist in Linden. Now, if we're talking about independent institutions, how could I, on behalf of the Guyanese people, accept a PPP activist that will obviously have axe to grind with people in communities, etc., as a representative on the Teachers Service Commission? I know the government might go ahead and appoint her, but look, meaningful consultation, it was also said in some of the ruling, time should be given and there should be careful consideration of the applicants. And therefore, in my opinion, what we should have gotten, apart from the CVs, was a clear indication of the grounds on which a particular person or persons are chosen. And to the extent, remember, we have to make proper decisions. And therefore, for us to make proper decisions, we have to have the basic, the information upon which we will make this decision. Then and only then will the consultation be meaningful. Let's assume I want to reject somebody. I must have some grounds to understand why that person was recommended. And then when I look against the reality, I can say, look, yes, this person is fit and proper, or this person isn't. I think one of the things that came out in the case in the CCJ is that you just can't reject people by saying they ain't fit and proper. There must be criteria, etc. And it is in that context there is need for more information to be able to give grounds in the meaningful consultation.
Mr. Norton, aren't you worried though that eventually the government may go ahead and appoint some of these commissions? Well, without your involvement or approval,
It was always the intention of the government not to be involved in meaningful consultation. From the first day we arrived, it was evident that what they wanted to do is to say, look, these people, approve them, the president is in charge. Now, there is no way I'm going to be opposition leader and operate in that way. And so, they might go ahead, I don't doubt it. They seem to want to go ahead, but it will be challenged in the courts. That is the bottom line. Because we know what is meaningful consultation. It is not a choice of the government to be involved in meaningful consultation. It is mandated by the Constitution. And therefore, it should be done in keeping with the law. Let us note that in the joint statement, I was careful to ensure that it is placed that all of this will operate in the context of the Constitution and the law. And that is what we seek to ensure.
If you allow me, Mr. Norton, I know my colleagues are waiting, but I just want as a logical follow-up. Sir, if you were to go to court or probably just to hold on to your position, aren't you also worried that this can affect the promotions of some of the members of the disciplinary services? And historically, your party, the PNC, has drawn a lot of support from the disciplinary services. Aren't you worried that this can have an adverse effect on your future?
I am always worried about adverse effects on our people. But there is a reality. Take the case we filed against the acting commissioner. Here is a question of principle and the law. And sometimes in life we make sacrifices to get better. If the government wants to run down the road of blaming us for not having a commission, that is fine. But the principle that has to be established is that these things must be established through meaningful consultation. Let us not forget, this whole idea of meaningful consultation emerged in the 1998 to 2001 constitutional reform, in which it was argued that it can't be just you sending me documents, etc., that you had to consult in a meaningful way. Now, if the government wants to violate the Constitution, we have to challenge it, but we hope good sense will prevail and the government will recognize that their actions will affect our people adversely. It is just like the question of the Chancellor and the Chief Justice. All and sundry are calling for their appointment. I've said we agree, we are willing to appoint them. For whatever reason, the government isn't. And not only that, if you read the tone of the letters, you will recognize the arrogance of the president. Like if you're saying, is my way or no way. Well, in a democracy, that has to be challenged, and we will challenge you.
Thank you. Mr. Kram.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Later, Margaret from the establishment. Mr. Norton, during yesterday's,
Could you raise your voice a little?
can you hear me better now?
Yes, I am.
During yesterday's statement from the President and the AG, the President indicated that he's received no communication of your unavailability, whether a call or in writing. We would have seen copies of a letter that you purportedly sent to Ms. Teixeira. I'm trying to find out at what time was this letter dispatched yesterday.
The office assistant confirmed, and when we spoke with him while he was at Mr. Shearer's office, it was 1:45. The first thing. The second thing, deliberately they didn't put the time that they received it. And when I saw this morning letter, I saw the dishonesty because a much later time was placed. And so I can say to you, it arrived before the scheduled time for the meeting. I know the president would have wanted to run off and say whatever he wanted to say. And so I think for that reason they gerrymandered the time. But that is the nature of the PPP. And that is why I said I cannot, we have to put some new systems in place. We'll deal with, through Mr. Roysdale Ford with Madam Teixeira, and we think that there is need for more time when we are dealing with these issues. Look, the reality is the letter was delivered after 4:30 on Friday. And it is not a case where it came into the office. It was left at the guard hut. Okay? That's the first thing. The second thing is, if you followed my schedule, I was out of town Saturday and Sunday doing political work. And so, effectively, I had the morning to deal with it. Now, you know these letters have got to be properly crafted. When you're dealing with people like the PPP, you have to skillfully craft your letters, and that is not done in an hour or two. Add as well that we are a political party, we are a coalition, and it is not one person that has to give inputs. We are not undemocratic like the PPP, in which Jack Deogan determine and the rest will follow. We have a party of a coalition of intelligent people, and we interact and arrive at positions on issues. So the mere sending of a letter at a particular time in itself is disingenuous, because they know, well, it might not be disingenuous. It might be they acting based on their culture of direction from the top, and therefore for them, in a short time, a response could be given. For us, it is much more. We have to consider all our constituents. We have to talk with people. We have to discuss with them. And then we decide on how we formulate and move forward.
Another question. Based on the CVs that you would have received, apart from the PPP activists that you would have identified, are there any other concerns with the names that were proposed?
I wouldn't go down the road. Let me tell you why I wouldn't go down the road. I did say I need to know the grums. I only identified that case because this is one that I did work on and knew what the status was. And there's a history to it. And so I was able to garner information. There is another person there in which we have some information on. But if you don't know the grounds on which this person is appointed, how do you reject or accept them? And that is the critical point. I don't want to reject people just for the sake of rejecting. Of course, I will reject any political activist being on an independent commission, because independence should mean independence. And you know full well that all the PPP does is seek to fill these institutions with people that they could dominate and control. Their interest is not democracy. Their interest is not a meritocracy and competence. Their interest is domination and control. So that when the King's second vice president call and tell them do X, Y, and Z, they will do it. That's the bottom line here again.
Thank you. Any other questions? Mr.
Mr. Norton, in terms of going to court, if it ends up
Shabbat.
there, are you hearing me?
Dennis, 1 second, please. Mr. Adam Harris' hand is up. I'll get back to you shortly. Mr. Adam Harris?
Yeah. Tell you what, I can defer to Dennis, so when he's finished, I can come back.
No problem. Mr. Dennis?
Thank you. Mr. Norton, if you were to go the route of legal action, if it comes to that, would you also be seeking some sort of injunctive relief to block the appointments?
I would just say to you, these are matters we are discussing with our legal team, and once the legal team would have arrived at a position, you'll be so informed.
Thank you.
Uh,
You can go
Good
ahead.
morning, everybody. Yeah, good morning, everybody. Comrade Leader, yesterday, Mr. Jagdeo had a press conference. I think he was in Linden with you, or at the same time you were in Linden, he was in Linden. And it turned out that he tried to call you a liar on a series of issues. One of them being the granting of scholarships, the other about granting houses to athletes, and some other things. Now, when you were in Linden, did your paths cross?
Not to my knowledge. I tend to walk the straight and legal line. So I don't think our paths would have crossed. But you know that Jagdo is a pathological liar. And I've given you evidence. He went on television and said he built Amelia's ward. I pointed out that he could not have been 10 years of age when Amelia's ward was built. He went around saying that I said I have the winning statement to polls, which I never did. Now, he had all of his people, NCN and all the television there. Why, if he isn't lying, he doesn't show the footage? Jagdeo lives a life distant from the truth. And one has to understand, when you are a failed leader like Jagdeo, you have to rely on lies and propaganda. He has to stay away from Skeldon, which was a failure under him. He don't want people to remember the fiber optic cable, the millions they wasted on it, and more. He doesn't want us to remember the lies he told sugar workers about how he is going to reopen the industry and all a set of nonsense. We are dealing with a man who knows no decency. And that is why a lot of times I ignore him, except he really crosses the path. I mean, I get he told them in Linden that I was going some car and I go in the wrong car. This is a child. This is a big man behaving like a child. He is not dealing with the critical issues. How is it that I'm going to improve the lives of the people? How is it, what measures I'm going to take to create a better life for the people of Guyana? What you see is a mechanism in which they walk around with cash, share, and at the end of the process, there is no accountability, there is no transparency, and you know the high level of corruption. So we have to see past the second vice president. He is just bad news for Guyana. I wish there was a much better person that could have been engaged in the PPP, but Jabara Jagdeo is bad news for Guyana. His life has been one which affected Guyanese in a negative way.
Follow up, please.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Now, in your opening statement, sir, you talked about the use of the Natural Resource Fund and the widening gap between the haves and the have-nots and the increasing pressure on the people at the lower level of the economic scale and all of that. How is this possible with this money being spent in Guyana on projects and going to, how is it that there is no trickle down?
Well, first of all, you will know that the government doesn't want transparency and accountability. I believe all the things have been put in place for the Procurement Commission. The government wouldn't set up the Procurement Commission. They don't have to consult me on that. But you know why they ain't setting it up? They want to plunder our treasury. And so they don't want rules and checks and balances. When you look at how they handle the Natural Resource Fund, you will see they were seeking to put people who will agree with them on every occasion without proper scrutiny. And so there is no way under this government you will have transparency and accountability. The solution lies in changing the government. The government has had a history of involvement in illegalities. A lot of the people who operate with them only know illegalities. And so it is very difficult to have an anti-corruption campaign in the PPP or while the PPP is in government. The solution has to be in change.
Thank you. Any other questions? Mr.
Is there a question?
Yes, Mr. Kram.
Hi, Mr. Manipal, a few weeks back, you would have raised some questions in relation to these temporary jobs that the Vice President has been announcing during his tour of the country. I'm just trying to find out if you would have received any response to these questions or any information relating to the temporary jobs, the questions you would have raised.
Well, what I noticed is in the public space, in the media, it is reported that persons will be paid $40,000 for 10 days of work, and they will be employed in the public sector, basically, in schools, in hospitals, in the regional administrations across the 10 administrative regions, in the education department, in the various other programs that fall within the regional administration. As I said the last time, and I wish to say again, the APNU AFC, we do not have a problem with young people and people in general getting employment and earning a living through honest work. However, we at the same time cannot have a system in place such as the public sector and know that there are people who are working in the public sector for a full 8 hours period earning minimum wage, which is somewhere around $74,000. When you look at this scheme of thing that Jagdeo is going around the country doing, and you don't know what is the criteria for employment, you don't know what are the qualifications in terms of the different jobs he's going to fill, the vacancies, and then you are going to just place it as temporary jobs but give a 1-year contract to the persons for $40,000, 10 days per month. It worries you, and it worries you because the employees of the public sector, they have to give their commitment in terms of their taxes that they have to pay as you earn, NIS contribution. They have to commit themselves from 8 to 4:30, and they have to do the job, and they were doing the job in these very areas that Jagdeo seemed to believe was understaffed. The question is, were they compensated for doing the work when they were doing it? That's the permanent staff I'm talking about. Another thing that worries me is across the country, in all 10 administrative regions, there are a number of vacancies that exist within the public sector. Each one of these regions, they have an authorized staff in detail that permits them to employ a quota of employees, as was approved by the budget, the most recent being Budget 2022. And if these vacancies exist, one would have thought that the proper thing to do is to employ people so that they can have job security, they can contribute back into our country by way of paying taxes so that you can continue to build your country, and they can also have the representation of unions. So if they are if they feel as though they were treated with injustice, they can get representation and the likes. Additionally, you have to also take into account that these jobs and their vacancies, even though you don't have a public service commission right now, they can the job description is already there, the job title is already existing, it was created. So employing them on a one-year contract could have still happened by way of a public service ministry contractual agreement, and give the people you are going to employ meaningful benefits and let them go through a proper system so that they can be vetted to ensure that they satisfy the criteria. We don't know who you're going to put to work in the hospitals. We don't know what section of the hospital, if there's specific training and so on that is required for you to deliver health services to the people of Guyana. We don't know who you're going to put in the school system to deal with our children, if they are properly qualified enough to handle our children and to interact with our children. We don't know what kind of people you're going to put in the administrative section of our region, if their qualifications fit the job description. All these are major concerns. Now, nothing is wrong with the job, again I say, but we want to know the details so that we will be able to better draw a conclusion on this project, as they term it.
But there are some points I need to add. If you promise people 50,000 jobs in a campaign, paying jobs, and then you resort to temporary jobs, you're admitting that you have failed.
Yes.
And what Jack Day is doing is trying to cover his rear because they have failed. They have failed to deliver jobs. It is evident that they have no plan. Everything is ad hoc. If I visit Linden, they're going to go instead of building 2 roads. I left Linden and I expect them to go Little Africa. They're just responding. They have no plan. That's the first thing. Second thing I want to say. Now, you are given lands. I have no problem with regional integration and Barbadians being involved, but it cannot be at the expense of our people. You cannot tell me that you just push Lindeners off of land in Wizrock area. You just push Lindeners off of land in Amelia's ward. You are depriving people of land. A farmer in Bushlot, a young person who wanted to farm, said to me that he would like to have land. Now, you are not giving your people the land, but you gone outside of Guyana with projects to give away our land. And this must not be seen as being anti-integration. I am pro-integration, but I'm not stupid. And it is absolute stupidity for us to have a high unemployment rate, and we're not using the lands, etc., to put our people in agriculture. And now, the approach the government is taking Nobody knows what criteria they will use for employing these people. Clearly, there will be no rules governing them. And therefore, the government can be able to hire and fire them as they like. And so it becomes a mechanism of control of people rather than an attempt to develop a quality life for people. And like I've said, everything that is done running around with these schemes are clearly schemes for corruption and a manifestation that there is no plan and that the government has failed when it comes to generating employment for young people. And don't forget, you know, while this government does that, it also has another plan. It is encouraging entertainers to promote entertainment that is not healthy for our young people. And so on the one hand, you are depriving them of proper jobs, and on the other hand, you are encouraging a subculture that destroys the character of young people and puts entertainment in a bad light, when entertainment should be contributing to the development of people. And I dare say this, if what had occurred in the national park had occurred with another entertainment group, this government would have said no to them. But there are certain entertainment groups in this country, their purpose is to ensure the lawlessness, ensure that the youth degenerates so that the government can exercise its control and domination. And while we say that, there is no proper programs in the Ministry of Youth, Sport and Culture for our young people. So you're dealing with a complete failure.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right. I don't see the hand of anyone else.
Can I make a quick addition?
You can go ahead, mister.
Yes, thank you. So just building off of the point regarding the failure to create jobs, what the PPP is really depending heavily on is generating jobs from lowering the cost of electricity and manufacturing and so on. But what has happened is that their projects are delayed by a year, more than a year, and that even recently we're hearing that the contractor is pulling out of the Amalia Falls hydro project, which is a perpetual disaster. And so they've failed in terms of their plans to create jobs, so they're making an attempt to try and create a few small jobs here and there to cover, as Lita indicated, this failure. The other thing that I wanted to ensure that we point out and emphasize, and it's something that I believe Mr. Harris was hinting to, is that we've seen a real increase in inequality and a real increase in poverty in the country over the past year or two. And that is something that Guyanese need to really get a good sense of, because during the same few years, in the past few years, we've seen the stock market go through the roof, we've seen housing prices go through the roof. There are Guyanese that are making money, there are some Guyanese involved in the oil and gas industry that are making money. But the ordinary Guyanese has not been able to benefit. Rather, we've seen standards of living decline. Even today, the oil price is over $120 a barrel. And I encourage Guyanese every day to check to see what that oil price is. This is a time of plenty, but the PPP's policies and approach to governance have meant that there isn't anything put aside to help people through this difficult period and to help them to benefit from our tremendous growth. So as much as they may say that they're going to create jobs and they're going to lower the cost of electricity, I would submit to the Guyanese people that given that Amalia again is proving to be problematic, it is very much in question whether any of that will come to pass and whether they can ever create the jobs that they are promising Guyana's young people. I recall, when I was growing up on the PUP, there was a real sense of hopelessness. There was no optimism about the future of Guyana. I am optimistic now that the country is growing, but I feel again and again that because of the increasing inequality, it's not a dream that we're looking at, it's a nightmare. And unfortunately, that seems to be the path that we're heading towards without fail.
Close.
All right, thank you. So at this time, I see no other hands raised, and I do believe that will bring us to the end of today's press conference. And I thank you once again for joining us on our live streams, and thank you to our media personnel for being here. Do have a wonderful afternoon.